Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name's Kyle and I'm sitting here on this 48 by 80 workshop that we just got framed up for our client. This is gonna be his future place of business. We've got 16-foot tall walls. We're gonna have a big wraparound porch. We're gonna be doing the interior on this. We've got a mezzanine build out on the inside. So definitely make sure you guys follow along for this one. Make sure you hit that subscribe button down in the corner. But let's go ahead and get into this video, and we'll start at the bottom when we do our brackets, and we'll build this thing from the ground up. All right guys, so I'm gonna do something a little bit different on this video, and I'm gonna do kind of a voiceover, and I'm gonna kind of let you guys in on what I'm doing, maybe just as it happens. So you can either shut my voice off and just watch, or I'll try to give you some insight on the process. And the most important thing to I guess, notice at the beginning of this job is that we try to do a ton of prep work. We try to assembly line the process. We try to do a lot of batch processes at the same time. So anything that is similar in nature, whether that's cutting up lumber or making up columns, we just do everything at once. We don't try to build one wall, then go and build the second wall. No, we build all the columns, then we cut all the lumber, then we lay everything out as you can see me doing here. I think Greg actually took off, so he left me to do all this work, which honestly, it's a lot of work. It's definitely post-frame. Moving all this large timber is definitely a young man's game, but you can only use machinery so often, and the rest you just have to move it. So it's okay, not a big deal. I gladly do it, I love it. But here you'll see me kind of laying everything out, making sure it's all measured accurately, and that is so when we build it, it's kind of squared up. So here you can see a good shot of just what I did in layout in preparation, and yeah, what a clean job site too. Appreciate that, man. That is awesome. So here you're just gonna kind of see a cool clip of me just going through, getting everything fastened, nailed, and this honestly is kind of what it feels like sometimes, like you're just going at it, you know, and getting all this nailing done. But this is a lot of work, believe it or not. The jumbo nailer works amazing, but it is heavy, it is big. Gladly though, I would rather do that than hand nail all these connections. So yeah. Now I'm also gonna try to give you guys some insight on like how many days this is. So this is day one. This is literally the first day here for framing, and we got everything, well, I basically got everything ready for day two, which is when Greg will be back, and we're gonna start actually framing up the walls. And if I remember correctly, we're gonna get all these walls framed in one day. So here you're gonna see the first wall go up, and what do you notice in the sky? Dude, it was a gorgeous, gorgeous start to the morning, and like almost instantly, clouds just start rolling in. But we already kind of started, we already committed, and honestly, the more we can get up before a storm rolls in, when these walls are just being built, the better we off, because the more structure that we can, you know, have bracing itself. So here we're just pounding in the nuts and bolts, getting things connected to our Midwest permacolumn brackets. But as this storm is approaching and we start to see some lightning, I'm like, Greg, let's throw an A-frame on this wall since there's really not much holding it up at the moment. Even though the wind will kind of pass through it, we still were kind of concerned, but we kept pushing forward and putting up sections of wall. I love the Cheyenne Teleboom. That's what's attached to my skid loader. It's expandable, hydraulically expandable, so I can just boom in and out, very effortless, and the Kubota 90 here lifts those wall sections like nobody's business. So once we have those walls up, we're gonna use our plate level. It's perfect. And we wanna, as you can see by the wall now, we wanna make sure that it's installed as perfectly plumb as possible. That's where it's gonna be its strongest, and also where we have to do minimal work later on, making sure that things are straight. So from the beginning, layout, building, everything, you gotta try to be your best, be as perfect as possible. You're not gonna be perfect, but if you can, you know, go for it early, it's gonna pay dividends in the long run when you get to the finishes. Ah, the jumbo nailer. Literally the best thing since sliced bread for a post framer, because if you gotta hand pound all those nails in, which we used to do, you quickly learn the value of that nailer. Look at that, isn't that awesome? I literally love using machines to do all the heavy lifting as I then decide to lift a column myself. And we do obviously a bunch of hand nailing still, because sometimes it doesn't make sense to bust the nailer out for just, you know, a little section like you've seen in that corner. But also on the flip side, I actually like hammering. So sometimes if you see us hammering and think, where's the jumbo nailer? You know, I just like to hammer sometimes. Now this is still day 2. Like I told you, I'm gonna try to do my best. We had that crazy weather, and then it started to push out, started to clear up, and man, did it get hot. So you'll see Greg change his shirt to a sleeveless that he had in his truck, but this is still day 2. We're still installing walls, and it's getting close to the end of our day, so we're definitely getting tired. But as you can see, we've got our headers going up now, and I actually have a video coming out for headers. So if that's something that you're interested in, look for that. I go over the whole header detail and how we build there. But yeah, this is kind of the last thing that we need to do to tie these walls together. And I was really pushing hard to get it done in that one day so that all these walls were framed on day 2. Big undertaking. You know, 30-year-old Kyle would have definitely had no problem doing this, but 40-year-old Kyle, this is a lot of work. What do you guys think? Is that a lot of work for 2 guys, one day, frame and stand all these walls, build these headers? Seems like it used to be the standard for us, but anymore, man, this is an undertaking, and definitely, I definitely enjoy a little bit of downtime at the end of the day after a day like today. Day 3, we've got our trusses show up. So you'll see me pulling that top truss off. That's an end truss, and we don't need that because they always put our 2 end trusses on the top of the pile, so we gotta get one off. But then we are going to, we're gonna make sure all these trusses are marked on the ground, so where our purlin locations are, where our wind tie locations are, and then we're gonna go ahead and start installing these. Now at a 48-foot wide truss, typically, I don't have my telehandler on site, but man, it really makes this process a lot easier because we did go ahead and build all of our wall sections. We have our headers in place, so it's not as easy to drive into a doorway. And this telehandler with the boom, the truss jib on it, it allows me to reach over the wall, even at a 16-foot wall, and set that truss in without ever having to drive into the building. And another thing you'll notice is we got really lucky. Truss day is probably my favorite day, and the weather was just perfect. It was no wind, blue skies, good temperature. I mean, it was warm. You know, this is middle of summer right here, but definitely a great day for trussing. So I'm just gonna let you guys enjoy a little bit of this. And remember, this is day 3 now of framing this building. Another thing to note is the way we do our trusses, the way they sit into the laminated column like saddle, and having a taller 15.5-inch heel, that's the end of the truss that sits in that saddle, we're able to, about at a 48-foot wide truss, that kind of maxes out where we're comfortably able to set the truss and walk away from it without any bracing. But 48 feet, depending on the weather, that's where we start bracing trusses temporarily until we get our purlins on. But this day was perfect. I mean, look at this. I'm just lifting this lumber. There's a whole pile of purlins for the first bay. I do believe maybe 30 or so, 32, 34. And there's like no breeze to speak of. So we are pretty lucky here. And just wanted to, I guess, let you guys know if you're watching this and you go do a bigger building and say, hey, I seen RR, just put the truss up there. Well, 48's about max for us. I would not feel comfortable going any bigger without a brace, a temporary brace. You know, when we started this thing, I don't know, 11, 12 years ago, started doing post frame. I didn't have any of these scissor lifts. I did end up renting a scissor lift pretty quickly, but we still climbed a ton back in the day. Every one of these purlins back in the day, we would have climbed up the truss, nailed it, and typically have like one guy in a lift feeding everybody else on the trusses. But as I've gotten older, as I've tried to be more safety conscious, anytime I can get in the lift, I'm gonna do it. It goes up and down without any effort on my part. And obviously the safety factor of always having that underneath you to, in case you were to slip, you know, the goal is to be in the lift, not falling down to the ground. So I do realize, you know, and I think that doing this job, there's always risks, and we all need to understand those risks. And sometimes you have to put yourself in a position where you have assessed that risk and determined that, you know, with the right mindset, the right safety precautions, the right know-how, experience, all those things, you know, sometimes you're going to be climbing around on the building. Sometimes you have to put yourself out there, and you'll see us, you know, in positions that maybe aren't the safest for somebody that's not experienced. And I would say, you know, you're right. And I'm always very conscious of that. And Greg and I talk about that, and we remind each other of our positions that we're in. But during truss day, it's just almost impossible. It's almost impossible not to put yourself in some positions sometimes. So you just always have to be cognizant, aware. And, you know, we've been doing this now for a long time, where we have communication established. We know what we're doing, and we make sure that we're always talking about that. Now, one thing that people don't talk about is, yeah, machines, you know, obviously help you be safe, right? Make your job a little bit easier. But what I would argue is that by utilizing machines, you don't utilize yourself, so you don't get as fatigued during the day. You know, you're able to kind of perform at a high level because the machines are doing so much for you, that I think that helps you stay aware of everything. You know, we all know we've been tired, and you kind of just lax on judgment. You kind of do things that maybe you shouldn't have done because you weren't really thinking clearly. Getting in and out of this scissor lift, using the telehandler, doing as much with a machine not only saves my back, but it also saves my mind and energy level during the day so that I can stay focused. So it's just something I think about. I always say, if there's something that I can do to make my job easier, whether that's buy a new machine, a new tool, implement a new process, I'm gonna invest in it. I don't care about the cost up front, because I know that it'll pay back dearly in the long run. And I want to continue to be able to do this as I get older, and I don't want to hurt my body. You know, I want to keep Greg healthy. I want to keep him happy, because that's the other side of it. When you're not as fatigued, you're also happier, and a happy person is just a more pleasant person to work around, right? We all know that. You're probably asking yourself, why did you guys try to thread the needle here? And honestly, I think we were just being kind of lazy and didn't want to have to move anything around. But with the telehandler, one guy on the truss, you can maneuver this stuff pretty good. This is the last truss going up. And just a kind of reminder, this is all still day 3 of framing. And I think it was a heck of a good day. We do end up getting all these trusses up, all the purlins up, and another hard day. So at this point, when this last truss is done, when the last purlins are installed, that is really the bulk of what I would say is the hardest labor-intensive days for us. I mean, there's some hard work still ahead of us, but once the main frame is up, I'm not having to maneuver and work with all this timber in my hands, you know, having to squeeze and push and pull. Like, that really does take a toll, and I'm always a little bit happy but also sad when these days are over, because this is my favorite part. I love framing a shell of a building, taking a pile of, you know, sticks and just turning it into something, and seeing that at the end of the day is really gratifying for me. And I think that's what's so great about this trade specifically, is that we have the ability to do that. And not a whole lot of trades get to do that. I mean, even stick frame homes, it takes a heck of a crew to build a home in a day. And, you know, Greg and I, 2 guys with the right machinery, the right process, we basically, you know, can build this 48 by 80 structure in 2 days. And that's what you're seeing here. This is day 2. I think it's pretty cool. So what we're doing right now is we're installing our wind ties. So our purlins on the top of the roof, they hold the trusses, you know, where they're supposed to be, but those bottom chords with weight on the roof, like when we, you know, finish this roof, put the steel on, snow load will squash, and if we don't have the bottom chord of that truss properly braced, it can just demolish this roof. Those truss bottoms can just kind of go any which way. So our main goal is to get the purlins on, to get the bottom wind ties on, and then you'll see these chains that we're putting on. And this is kind of locking. We're going to put chains up to the peak, and we're going to kind of lock it back so that the trusses can't fall over. But then we're also going to put some what we call cross chains, which is what you see here, that is going to hold the building from any wind load that is getting pushed on it. And then we're obviously going to take, and you see that X on the end wall, that is in order to maintain plumb corner posts. So we want all 4 corners to be plumb. So we put an X on every corner or every wall section right from the get-go. And this just helps hold everything in to keep everything locked in, because the quicker we can make sure that everything's plumb, that everything is level and all that good stuff by using these chains, the better we are off in the end, because wood will, you know, with moisture, with time, when it sits out in the weather, it can move around, it can warp, it can basically harden and stiffen to whatever position you put it in. We've all seen that with like furniture bending. And so by making sure that this structure is as good as possible day one of framing, it's going to help us later on when we actually start putting our finishes on. So main frame done. Now we're on to what's kind of boring for me. I'm not really a fan of doing overhangs. I think they look amazing. I think that in order to have a well-performing building, and I mean, you know, ventilation, having a properly ventilated post frame. One of my biggest pet peeves is when I see a post frame go up, a metal clad exterior building. It could be steel frame, wood frame, it doesn't matter, and there's no overhang. An overhang is so important. It not only allows proper inflow for ventilation, if you have a proper, you know, ridge vent, it also, you know, an overhang is going to keep the water from literally running down your wall. In most cases, wind-driven rain will obviously get a wall wet, but just helping keep moisture away from the building, I think it's a great thing. So overhangs are just a standard. I literally have never built a structure, a post-frame structure, without an overhang. It has been one of the things that from day one, when customers say, I want to save money and not do an overhang, we don't give them the option. You have to do an overhang. So it's just the way it goes. But I do like the overhang, and I would never build without one. So just take that for whatever it's worth. If you're going to do a building, make sure there's an overhang. Now, I know it may be hard to believe, but those two 60-penny nails, that's what really holds up our overhang. And I promise you, pulling those out is no easy task. But also you got to remember that once the steel is installed, that's going to also aid in the strength of the overhang. I know not something to rely on, but I would have no problem sitting there hanging on these 2x6 subfascia and doing pull-ups. I mean, they're plenty strong. And clearly I must have been hungry, must have been snack time. I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing here, but I'm definitely snacking. And so I do believe this is day 4. So we got the trusses up on day 3, and then we started overhangs on day 4. And if I remember correctly, Greg and I kind of did a half day here. We basically went around and did all the overhangs, and we didn't spend a full day here because I do believe we were kind of looking at the schedule, and I think we had a trip. I think Greg and I went somewhere on a trip, and we had to leave. But day 4 here, we will get the overhangs wrapped up. And I'm trying to remember to get you guys an update on what day we're at, just because people always ask me, like, okay, I mean, I see these videos. How long are you actually working? And something I don't want to miss pointing out. If you've seen how I did the peak there on this end fascia, I just took 2 boards, ran them on top of purlins, found the intersection point, and cut them. I didn't do any math here, nothing fancy. And we're just using GRK structural screws to put all this together. People always comment on using screws over nails. This is what these screws were intended to be used for. Structural framing connections. So don't worry, guys. I wouldn't be using some crappy screws that are not made for this. These are GRKs. And if you're curious what the heck's going on right here, I've shared this a lot of times, but we never end our fascia on our ends on a purlin. We just run everything wild, and basically we're saving time cutting to fit to size, but also I think this is just a stronger connection in this application. I don't think there's any reason not to do this. We just put a scrap piece behind it, fasten it all together, and it straightens everything, it makes it nice and strong, and then we get good screws on the purlins and no toenails from both sides. So now that we've got our overhangs done, we've got our purlins on, we've got all of our walls plumbed up with these chains, I'm gonna come through and I'm gonna do my X bracing. And this is something that over the years we've improved upon. I had to do an engineered building for a commercial setting one time, and the engineer came back with these double X braces. And this is where I got this from, so you'll kind of see this develop. But instead of, a lot of times you see people take a 2x6 and they'll run it from the bottom of a column to the top of the next column in a straight line. And you got to think about this in triangles and strength in like math. A 90-45-45 triangle is the strongest triangle. So when you start increasing that angle, and you can imagine, you see my two X's here. If I just had one X or just one board going top to bottom, that would literally not be strong at all. So we just make it a standard when we do our permanent wall bracing like that, it's always going to be an X.
Wow, good job, dude.
Good job, Greg. I don't know how long you would have tried to hook that with that string, but I'm glad I was there to help you. So there you go, guys. That is the frame up of the newest project. It took us 4 days. If you guys enjoyed this different style where I did the voiceover, let me know in the comments. Definitely hit the thumbs up if you are so inclined, and if you aren't already subscribed, I would appreciate that. But we're gonna catch you guys on the next one, and that will be putting metal roof on.